Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Trooper Bob with ABC News. I'm inside the traffic tracker, and today I have a special guest with me, Attorney General Alan Wilson.
Hey, man, it's great to be with you.
Nice to be with you, too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for taking time out and coming down here to spend a couple minutes with me and have a couple of questions for
Absolutely.
you. I want to go back in time just a little bit. I know you're in the National Guard.
Yeah.
And you joined right after college. You joined the Guard immediately after college. So tell me, what inspired you to join the Guard? Why was that important to you?
Well, first off, I grew up in a family where all of my uncles, my dad, my biological father who was killed in the military, every man, every male, and some females served in the military in my family. My three brothers are all commissioned officers. All of them have served overseas, as have I. My adopted father, Joe Wilson, spent over 30 years in the Army National Guard, retiring as a colonel. So serving in the military was not something that you chose to do. It was something that was expected of you. So I grew up just revering the military in our family, the people that served in generations past and all the other wars. And I felt like it was my calling to do that, and something I've always wanted to do, and I've never regretted a moment of it.
Back when I was on the highway patrol, I used to see at the Emergency Operations Center in fatigues.
Yeah.
You're there during the hurricane evacuations.
Yeah, I've been involved in probably over a dozen natural disaster incidences, including the 1,000-year flood over a decade ago. So as a young lieutenant all the way up to a full-bird colonel advising senior military leaders in South Carolina, I have been involved in that Emergency Operations Center many times. I now serve at National Guard Bureau in Washington, D.C., and continuing to serve today. I'm coming up on 30 years.
Congratulations, and thank you very much for your service. I know you spent some time in Iraq. You received a combat action badge for it. In the Navy, we would say Bravo Zulu for that. But when you were in Iraq, what is something that you appreciate now that you didn't appreciate until you went over there and came back?
Well, I mean, the short, funny answer is you miss running water, flushing toilets, electricity. Eating on the hood of a Humvee, and sitting at a table at home is different because most of your meals you're eating on the hood of a Humvee or something like that when you're on convoys. But in all seriousness, there's so many things we take for granted in this country. I mean, people complain a lot, when it's too hot, or when the air conditioning breaks down, or they complain, what first world problems. And when people say that these are first world problems, until you lived in a third world, you don't understand how silly some of our first world complaints can be. I also remember being over there for the first elections after Saddam Hussein was overthrown, and the Coalition Provision Authority held the first elections. I would say over 70 or 80% of Iraqi citizens came out and voted, and they were being attacked, they were being shot by insurgents, and they still showed up to vote. And I look back here in America, and there's so many people who do not take the time to vote, and all it is a minor inconvenience on their way to or from work. And then you had Iraqi citizens over here, risking their lives to vote at that time. And so I think that's just one of the things that people take for granted over here, how great we actually have it. Yeah, we have problems. And I'm not saying we don't have bad problems, but when you have seen poverty in a third world country, it is next level. It is very different. It is jarring.
I've been around the world with the Navy, too. Spent some time in Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield when I was over there. But here you get to complain. In some parts of the world, you can't complain. You don't have a voice.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. I mean, people complain about me as an elected official. They complain about other elected officials. That's part of the American way. And by the way, I complain too. I'm not above it. No one's above it. But that's one of the wonderful things about being an American, is that we have the right to complain about our officials without being shot or hauled off to some gulag somewhere.
Sure. You're also obviously you're an attorney. What made you decide to go to law school?
Initially, it was the respect I had for my father. My father had been a real estate attorney, and he had served in the state legislature, but I remember growing up watching him, serve people in his community, both in the state senate, but also as an attorney. He was, like I said, he was a real estate attorney, and I thought that one day it might be kind of fun to go work with my father doing real estate closings, and I went to law school initially to do that, more to kind of be part of my family business. But after I graduated after I graduated law school, I had an opportunity to clerk for a circuit court judge, and I got to be in the courtroom for a year, sitting up there on the bench, watching criminal and civil cases come and go. And what I discovered about myself is that I am not a transactional attorney. I wanted to be in the courtroom, and I really fell in love with the idea of being a prosecutor. And then after I left the judge's office, I got a job in the local solicitor's office, and the rest is history. But being in the courtroom, presenting the people's case on behalf of victims or people who don't have a voice for themselves is something that I just really became passionate about doing, and that's why I did it.
Turning back time just a little bit, if you weren't an attorney at that moment in time, you said, you know what, I want to be a lawyer. But if you weren't a lawyer, what else would you be today? What other profession would you have chosen?
You know, I have a really strong passion for mentoring and educating and younger people. Mm-hmm. So I have a feeling that I would have either been a teacher or a professor or a youth pastor. I mean, I have to feel that way. I'm always mentoring 1Ls in law school. I always have college kids coming up and high school kids coming up and asking me questions about a career in law or a career in the military, a career in law enforcement. You know, I give speeches around high schools all over South Carolina talking about leadership and overcoming adversity. I love the idea of mentoring and helping mold minds and teaching young people how to, not so much what to think, but how to think and how to overcome setbacks in life, because I've had them. And passing that along to young people is something I'm very passionate about. So I think I would have been in a profession that dealt with educating or mentoring young people.
I know in 2012 you worked with local legislators to strengthen the human trafficking law, South Carolina's human trafficking law. Is there obviously one person being trafficked? That's horrific. Yeah. But are you seeing groups of people, and are you seeing them where in South Carolina? Are you seeing them in the big cities? Are you seeing them in rural areas, or what could people look for?
Well, I mean, when I give speeches about this, I always start off by saying when I ran for Attorney General, I never once ran on the platform of creating a human trafficking task force. Mm-hmm. You know, there are some issues that candidates for office run on because they see a problem, but human trafficking is one of those things that didn't register on people's minds at that time, including mine. But after I got elected, I learned a lot about it. I learned that it was a $150 to $200 billion a year industry worldwide. I learned that there are estimates of 40 to 45 million victims of human trafficking a year worldwide. I learned that the United States is the #1 destination for human trafficking. I learned that South Carolina is nestled between two of the top hubs for human trafficking in our country, that being Charlotte and Atlanta. I also know that along the coast here in South Carolina, which are high traffic areas for tourism, these are high traffic areas for human trafficking. A lot of sporting events here. There's a lot of out-of-town visits here. There's also rural areas, and not just the sex trafficking, but the labor trafficking is exploding, and not just South Carolina, but everywhere. So after learning about this, we decided to create the Human Trafficking Task Force, which started off as a small unit of about 15 mandated members. We now have over 2,000 participating members on our listserv, as well as 11 regional task force, and educating the public and combating this horrible deplorable crime is something that's become a passion of mine. And so what I do want to say, Bob, is when people think of human trafficking, they think of like Hollywood movies, like Taken with Liam Neeson. It's a good action movie. Yeah, that stuff may happen as far as people being kidnapped when they're overseas or in a third world country. But one of the top relationships that traffickers have, the trafficking victims, is as they're a relative or a close family friend. So it's not the snatch and grab in a van with a ski mask on and haul you off to never be seen again. It's you're being trafficked under the noses of your family while you're living in your home. We see that frequently. We see that with employers. We see that with people who are in romantic relationships with their significant other. So, I mean, a lot of the trafficking going on is not like in Hollywood where it's like the Russian mafia or someone in Colombia, South America kidnapping you. It happens here, and you don't want to stereotype victims or traffickers because they can be anyone at any socioeconomic level. But I'm really proud of the strides that we've made in the last 15 years, and South Carolina is now a gold standard for combating human trafficking.
You're running for governor?
Yeah.
If you're voted in by the people, what are your first 2 orders of business?
Well, that is a difficult question because I believe that you can walk and chew gum at the same time, and so I think I can do more than 2 things at once. But having said that, if you're going to pin me down to 2 things, I mean, the things I'm hearing a lot about, especially from the business community, is we want to have a robust, aggressive campaign for economic development, and not just to pile people in here and overcrowd. We want economic growth that respects the character of our respective communities. But in order to have economic growth where all boats, mom and pop businesses and families at all socioeconomic levels are rising at the same time, you have to have a state with the appropriate infrastructure, roads and bridges, the energy grid. It all needs to be expanded. We need to invest in that. You need to attract outside capital, which is why we need to eliminate the state income tax, because almost every other state in the Southeast has already done it or is going to that. And we're being left out. We have the highest marginal income tax. You have to go as far as Oregon or Washington State to find an income tax as high as ours. And so South Carolina needs to do better. We need to revisit our property tax structure here in South Carolina. So in order to have economic development, you have to be able to have an infrastructure that can support and attract these businesses. You need to have pro-growth policies, like making sure that we're not overly litigious. We want to make sure that we have the infrastructure to receive. Also, education, pipelining workers into the workforce. When these companies come and as they grow, you want to have students that are ready, students graduating high school and/or tech college or regular four-year college, ready to get to work the day after they walk out, regardless of high school or college. And so these are things that I intend to focus on like a laser. Protecting students, protecting families is always a core function of government. As Attorney General, I've made it a core function of my administration. And Bob, I don't know if you knew this, 75% of the elected Republican sheriffs in South Carolina have already endorsed me for governor. And there's more to come. And so having an overwhelming majority of the sheriffs in our primary come out and support me is something I'm incredibly proud of. And it says a lot about how I prioritize protecting families, supporting law enforcement, and serving victims.
You mentioned something in the beginning when you started talking about roads. I've spent half of my life, literally half of my life, and other troopers who are around the state.
On 526.
Well,
or I-26.
526, I-26, but I-95 most importantly. I knew, even as a young trooper, during the holiday period, if you didn't get out of the median by 10 o'clock, you weren't getting out of the median because there's so much traffic. You go into Georgia, and it's so much, you feel like the world just opened up to you because you're hitting 4 or 5 lanes.
So when I'm driving from Georgia into South Carolina I-95, you ever watch The Wizard of Oz? You know when Dorothy goes from color to black and white? In the movie, that's what it feels like. It feels like you're going from an old black and white, state into a color state. Like when you're going from South Carolina to Georgia, it's like 2 different roads.
It's like you're going back into a funnel because when I monitor traffic during the holiday period, I see all the red there in Savannah coming in because you have all those lanes merging into 2 lanes. Now, thank God that hurricane last week didn't come over here. But if it hit Florida, Georgia, and I've seen it before where those states evacuate, you're going through South Carolina on just 2 lanes.
Yeah.
And for those folks that are going to Disney World, let's just say, from the states north of us, you're coming through South Carolina on 2 lanes. Like, this is 2025. Like, we should have more lanes because we're coming up to Thanksgiving coming up.
Yeah.
And I know what parts of those interstates are going to clog up, not from crashes, just from like the accordion effect where you have a slower vehicle in the right lane and you only have 1 lane open for those cars. We have too much traffic going on. But do you envision I-95 being expanded any in the near future?
Well, look, when I'm governor, I'm going to prioritize infrastructure at roads, bridges, and the energy grid. But you got to be innovative to do it. I mean, obviously, I don't want to raise taxes to do it, but I think there are things that South Carolina can do better. For instance, the largest landowner in the state of South Carolina is the state of South Carolina. And as you look what other states are doing, all of that grass between the 2 interstates, the westbound, eastbound, and the north and south, South Carolina owns that. The right-of-ways on the outside, South Carolina owns that. Why are we not monetizing that dead dirt? I mean, should we put something there? Should we put a state-owned or at least a private-public partnership on a state toll road in the middle to allow that to pay off the bond to give people, South Carolina's get a discount, or maybe we put private industry there. We allow there to be, rest stops with, like a Spinks company or a Chick-fil-A or something. Allow people to get gas there on the sides of the interstates, and then get back onto the interstate. You can charge a premium for that and let that help pay. But South Carolina can take a lot of its property and monetize it and get people to lease it. Why are we not leasing fiber optic to companies laying fiber optic cables along the interstates? We own that land. Let's get a lease on it. Let's start using that money to fund infrastructure and road widening projects and bridge repair. This is something that we can do a better job. Here's another thing. Most state government buildings, if not all state government buildings, they're all public, which means they're not paying property taxes. But if you have mixed use, put in restaurants and put in commercial space on the ground floor or the top floor and let the state government offices be there, but let those people pay property taxes. I mean, there's ways that we can make more money to fund infrastructure projects like widening I-95, 26, 77, 85, et cetera. But we can do a better job, and as governor, I'm going to look for innovative approaches to fixing our infrastructure crisis here in South Carolina.
Well, they are widening I-26, which is good news in certain areas because it is a hurricane route from Charleston, and we've seen how bad the interstate clogs up when for prior hurricanes that came to Charleston, for those folks need to go to Columbia. That's the hurricane route right there at I-77. So DOT is widening in certain areas, but hopefully one day we'll see it widened all the way to Greenville.
Well, let a private company own that, at least that spot, and let them run a toll, which again, let out-of-towners pay the bulk of that, and people who live in the state can pay either a reduced cost to use that toll road, and then of course when we pay it off, retire the toll. They did that down in Hilton Head. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's things that we can do, and again, you got a lot of people from out of state coming here that are using these roads. They might pay a little $2.25 premium to use that extra lane that isn't clogged up and there's a hurricane or something. I mean, we can think outside the box approaches to basically prioritizing our infrastructure issues here in our state.
What new business would you like to see come to South Carolina? Anything specific that's not here yet?
I want the kind of state where every industry and every type of business feels welcome and wanted and encouraged to move here, whether it's manufacturing, banking, healthcare, tech, whatever. We've become a manufacturing state. You got
automotive up here too.
Automotive, absolutely. You got the port of Charleston. I mean, you got the port right here. There's 51 reasons why people want to come to this area of the state because of the economic development, the 51 feet in the port. That is huge. That is the deepest port on the eastern seaboard, and that is huge for economic growth and development. You want to make sure you're doing it in a way that is respectful of the character of the community that is here. It's already too crowded, so you need to have a better plan. But, going back to your question, there's no one industry I would favor over the other. I want South Carolina to be the kind of state that is attractive to all industries, regardless of what you do. And by the way, not just the big people that come in and want to drop $1 billion in investment. I know a lot of people say they get all this corporate welfare, but I want pro-growth policies for mom and pop businesses. My brother and his business partner started a small business in a garage. Today it's called Palmetto State Armory. They employ over 2,000 people, and they're in multiple states. I mean, I want to help everyone get from a garage to as big a company as they want to be.
Let's go to education. If you are voted in as governor, is there something with education that you'd like to see that you're not seeing now, or whether it's buses, schools, whether it's faculty, teachers?
Well, first off, continuing, and Governor McMaster and the legislature have done a good job on promoting public safety in schools, making sure every school has an SRO, making sure there is adequate resources there so that parents aren't fearful or afraid that while their children at school there could be an active shooter situation. We've seen it before. That is always a priority. But when you're talking about education, a couple things. By the time a child gets to the third grade, you can look at their testing scores, and with some degree of certainty, you can predict, at least statistically, where that child is headed in their life. And I think that we need to invest more heavily in early childhood reading programs like 3-4K. I think that we need to invest in math comprehension programs, because you're either going to pay for it on the front end of a child's life, or when that child is, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, they're either going to be on some kind of state entitlement program or they're going to be in prison. And so we can pay for it on the front end, or we can pay for it on the back end. I'd rather invest in that child. There's an old saying, Bob, so the twig bends, the mighty oak grows. These children are like twigs. They're easier to bend and get moving in the right direction when they're 4 years old than when they're 40 years old. And once they become a mighty oak, once they've already set whatever direction they're growing, it's a lot more difficult to bend them back the right way. You almost have to cut them down. Pardon the metaphor, but that's how I feel about it. Another thing, our dual enrollment program in South Carolina compared to North Carolina is anemic. Dual enrollment allows kids to knock out general education requirements ahead of technical college or four-year colleges. And like I've got a niece that knocked out 2 years of college before she even graduated high school. I would like to see more programs jointly run and dually operated by technical colleges and four-year colleges, and in every school district, not just the wealthy school districts, to give families living on the margins accessibility and opportunity for the kids who have the inclination and the aptitude to knock out as much of their education before they graduate high school, so that if they want to go to a tech college or a four-year degree, it'll be a lot more accessible and a lot more affordable. Another thing, we're turning away every year roughly 4,000 to 5,000 students who apply to technical colleges. I don't know if you knew that. Not just for an associate degree, for kids who want to be welders, coders, nurse techs, rad techs, machinists, welders, whatever the case may be. And we're turning them away because the instructor to student ratios are different for those technical programs compared to, say, a bachelor's degree in a four-year college. One college president said, Alan, I can put 35 students in an English class. I can't put 35 students in a welding class because half of them come out, missing a finger. So investing in that to give opportunity and accessibility to families in the margins, because if you can pipeline those kids more quickly from high school to a high-paying job, making $95,000 as a welder in Williamsburg County is a big deal, and it is life-changing for that student and that family.
My career obviously was on the highway patrol. I wanted to ask you this too. On the patrol, in patrol school, it seemed like it was a week long. We had courtroom procedure, so we pretended we had a courtroom and prosecuting cases and stuff. And even when I was a trooper, I sat on other troopers' cases that they had, whether it was DUI or something else they had, just to get experience.
Yeah.
And right before I retired, we had DUI lawyers come in to help with that caseload. Someone graduating this Friday that's in law enforcement. I know you've spoken at graduations before, but with today's world, the way the world is today for law enforcement, any kind of advice you can give someone graduating this Friday that wants to be in law enforcement?
Probably two pieces of advice. Zealously guard your reputation, okay? And number two, never stop learning. I've learned this as a military officer. On the first one, zealously guard your reputation. People will meet your reputation before they meet you. And in law enforcement, your reputation matters. Your credibility and your reputation for trustworthiness and honesty is critical to you being able to do your job. Also, I'm a big backer of the blue, but in my history, in my career in law enforcement, you run into some law enforcement officers who put on that uniform, like the way some judges put on that robe, and they forget who they are. And they start to see themselves as their title, not as just a regular person. And then they start to wield that title. So you want to be meek with your power. Meek is not weakness; it's power under control. If a law enforcement officer pulls me over right now, okay, I'm not the attorney general. I'm a motorist. Both of my hands are on the steering wheel, and I am going to show that officer the respect that he or she has earned and deserves because of the role that they play. Okay, so. It doesn't matter who you are. Respect law enforcement, but law enforcement should also respect the local citizenry, and don't ever try to bully them. So guard your reputation for honesty and truthfulness. Guard your reputation for being a fair broker as much as you possibly can. And number two, just because you have graduated from the Criminal Justice Academy or you've gotten an associate's or college degree, that is not the end of your education. They encourage us in the military to never stop reading, never stop learning, never oppose the idea that you can learn something new or that you need to be corrected. I just graduated from the U.S. Army War College last year. Here I am, 51 years old. I was 51 at the time, graduating, getting my master's in strategic studies, and going back to school at 50-something years old, learning things as a senior officer in the military that I did not know. You will never arrive in your life at a place where you know everything you need to know. So guard your reputation, never stop learning, hone your craft. It will serve you well later in your law enforcement career.
Congratulations on your graduation there. I have a lighthearted question for the final question.
Okay.
All right, so we're in South Carolina. We've been here a long time. I've spent more time here than anywhere else in the world, and you have too. Shrimp, corn, sausage, right?
Yep. I know what you're describing.
Okay. Is it Beaufort stew? Is it Frogmore stew?
Or low country
low
boil.
Country boil?
Right. Well, that depends. Obviously, if you're in the low country, they're going to call it low country boil. If you're in certain rural areas, you're going to call it Frogmore stew, right? I mean, it just depends on where you are in the state. I thought you were going to ask me a really hard question like barbecue, vinegar, tomato, or mustard. Like that is a very divisive question that divides families. People fight over this. I'm glad you didn't ask me that question. But no, I've called it all three things, depending on where I am and whose house I'm at. It just depends on what they call it. I think I've been told that if you swap out shrimp for crawfish, that it's Frogmore stew. Have you ever heard that?
I haven't heard that, but I know if I post a picture of it, if I make it, I post a picture of it, it gets a lot of traction, a lot of comments on it from people like, if you're in Beaufort, you call it Beaufort stew, Frogmore stew. So I call it I guess I'm used to calling it Beaufort stew. When I was a young trooper, they introduced me to it, and I did that, and the chicken bog and all that stuff. So they introduced me to all that stuff.
Whatever we're going to call it, we're all going to agree that it's delicious.
Absolutely, absolutely. Attorney General Alan Wilson, thank you very much for taking time to come down and sit in the traffic tracker. Really appreciate it. Best of luck to you. As always, make sure you buckle up. Don't be ejected from life. Make it a good Wednesday. Thank you for watching.